Hey, friend, Chris here from WideLogicProRules.com, the website that helps you get the most you can out of Apple's Logic Pro. Welcome to video number 8 in our ongoing series all about getting started with Atmos in Logic. In today's video, we're going to explore the LFE or low frequency effect channel. So number 1, we'll explore what the LFE actually is. Number 2, we'll explore why you might want to send different tracks and channel strips to this dedicated output of the surround bed. And the key word there is might, because you don't have to send anything to the LFE if you don't want to. And number 3, we'll explore routing options when it comes to tracks and channel strips using the surround panner, 3D object panner, as well as any auxiliary channel strips that you want to pass the LFE signal through. Of course, before we dig in, let's shout out our sponsor of the series, which is IK Multimedia. Now, again, IK was very supportive of this series on WideLogic Pro Rules, and to help me out, they sent along on loan a set of their iLoud MTM immersive bundle of speakers. And you can see these speakers right behind me. This is a bundle of 11 of the very popular iLoud MTM speakers from IK. And I think this bundle is fantastic for anyone that wants to get into Atmos and immersive audio on a speaker-based setup. Number 1, this bundle is very budget-friendly, I think, as compared to other options that are out there. Number 2, these speakers sound fantastic. I really have fallen in love with this bundle, so much so. Number 3, these speakers are light and they're small and they're easy to mount on something as simple as a microphone stand, as I've done in my own space. And number 4, thanks to the built-in ARC technology, you can tune each speaker to your space, so what you're hearing from each speaker is something you know you can trust. I'll include a link in the description below, as well as in this video, that will take you right to IK's website if you want to learn more all about the iLoud MTM immersive bundle. All right, in today's video, we're going to take a break from the project of the last couple of videos. Though the synth bass in front of us on screen is from that same exact project, just so we can hone in specifically on the LFE channel of the surround bed without being confused by other sounds and tracks of a dense project. Don't forget that headphones are required for listening to all audio examples from today's video, as we'll be listening to the synth bass through the Dolby binaural renderer of the Dolby Atmos plugin in Logic Pro. The binaural renderers are specifically for headphone playback and will not render effectively on studio monitors or on your Mac's hardware speakers or on anything other than a pair of headphones. All right, today we're going to focus entirely on the LFE channel of the surround bed, as noted here in the Dolby Atmos plugin. First, what does LFE stand for? Well, it could be either low frequency enhancement channel or low frequency effects channel. Typically, the LFE is an output from your audio interface to a dedicated subwoofer. In a more typical stereo setup that includes a subwoofer, you would connect the outputs from your audio interface, the left and right channels, to the inputs of that subwoofer. And from there should also be a set of outputs from the subwoofer that you would connect to your left and right speakers for stereo mixing. And from there, you set the crossover on the subwoofer to cover the very bottom end of the spectrum, and then anything above that crossover is passed along to your left and right studio speakers to cover the rest of the spectrum. But in a stereo setup, the subwoofer is there to more accurately play back the very bottom end of the spectrum that might not be possible with just your left and right studio speakers. However, the LFE doesn't exist to more accurately present to you the bottom end. It, in fact, is right in the title. It's either a low frequency enhancement or low frequency effect channel. So the LFE should be treated as a special effect channel or a channel used for enhancing the bottom end, to add emphasis, not to send your kick, your bass, or any other low-end instruments specifically to. And Dolby itself recommends on its own support page that, quote, use of the LFE can be considered for supportive elements of the mix, but not as a destination for all low-frequency content. Of course, we'll be listening to the LFE using the Dolby binaural renderer for headphone playback, but if you'll be using a speaker-based setup for listening and working on Atmos projects, in that case, we'll want to go to the top taskbar, go to Logic Pro, go down to Settings, over to Audio. And right under the I/O assignments, you'll want to set the I/O assignments for the surround setup. In this case, I would suggest show as whatever kind of setup you're working with. In my case, that's 7.1.4. And make sure to set the LFE output channel to the actual channel on your audio interface that you'll be sending to a dedicated subwoofer. Sending audio to the LFE of the surround bed is as simple as can be when working with a track or channel strip that's using the surround panner. First, let's take a quick listen to the synth bass before we send any of its audio to the LFE. All right, we can see that this synth bass is being sent to the left and right channels at equal volume in our surround bed of 7.1.2. If we go ahead and double click on the surround panner for the synth bass, there's a dedicated slider at the bottom of the surround panner window that allows us to send increasing amounts of this bass synth to that LFE channel. So let's take a listen and I'll increase the level. All right, now we can see on the level meter of the master channel strip that I'm sending audio from the synth bass track to the LFE output channel. Now it's really important to emphasize again that the LFE output is specifically for enhancement, for special effect. For example, if you're doing post-production for a movie or television show and there's suddenly a big explosion and you want to emphasize that explosion, you might send some of that audio from the explosion track to the LFE just to add a little more girth and weight to that moment. Similarly, if you want to add a little heft and weight to a kick drum or a synth or something else in a musical production, you may want to bump up the slider on the surround panner just to add a little more emphasis to those low-end instruments. But the LFE is not a dedicated output that you should put all of your low-end instruments and tracks to. I mean, let's just remind ourselves that this is what the synth sounds like as we hear it through the binaural renderer, through the left and right speakers. And this is what the LFE sounds like when we mute all the other channels in the surround setup. And that's because the LFE is low pass at around 120 hertz. And if we end up muting all the other outputs in the surround setup with the thinking that our bass should play out of only the LFE, well, we're going to end up with a mix that sounds kind of weird. So a lot of important information and articulation of your low-end instruments could be lost if you only send these tracks to the LFE channel. So again, if there's only one thing you take away from today's video, the LFE channel is specifically to add enhancement, to add effect, to add emphasis to specific instruments in the low-end territory. Thus, in my case, sending the synth bass to the left and right speakers and then adding a little bit of heft and emphasis using the LFE slider is completely reasonable and okay. We can also send a dedicated LFE signal from auxiliary channel strips. For example, if we set send field 1 for our synth bass to that of bus 1, we'll create aux 1, which can be seen in the mixer, and set the send level from bus 1 to full blast just by holding Option and clicking. All right, let's take a look and a listen on the level meters on the master channel strip to see what kind of output action we're getting from this aux. Okay, so we're not seeing an LFE signal yet from the stereo aux, as we can note here on the level meters on the master channel strip, but this can easily be changed. If we go to the surround panner for aux 1 and double click, let's increase the LFE level now for this aux. All right, now we're seeing a dedicated LFE signal from aux 1. And all we had to do was increase the LFE level from that surround panner of the aux. However, things can get trickier when you want to pass the LFE signal of a track specifically to and through a separate aux. For example, if we use an instance of Space Designer to convert the stereo auxiliary channel strip to 7.1.2 or a surround channel strip, I'll load a surround preset. If we take a look and a listen to the audio that's passing from our synth bass to this instance of Space Designer, and I'll open the panner for our synth bass and turn off every output except for the LFE. Let's take a look and a listen now. Interesting, we're still getting audio from our synth bass. If we set the input section here to surround. And let's load a surround level meter right before Space Designer so we can get a real sense of what the heck is going on here. All right, so we're still getting our full signal from the base, even though I've muted every single output, but we're not getting the LFE to pass along to the surround channel strip. Well, that's because our send to the surround aux is set to post fader. And if we want to send the LFE to the separate aux, we need to switch the send assignment from pre-fader or post-fader to post-pan. Now take a look and a listen. All right, so we're getting that LFE signal. If I reintroduce all the speaker outputs here. All right, now the reason we're not hearing the LFE quite yet, in this specific case of Space Designer, we can increase the LFE to the reverb slider. All right, so we're getting the LFE, but take note that we're not hearing just everything below 120 hertz. No, in this case, our signal to Space Designer is not being low passed at all. This brings up an important point. We're sending the full signal of our synth bass through the LFE. So if we want to send just the low end of our synth bass to this instance of Space Designer, in that case, you might want to load an instance of an EQ in multi-mono mode and set the LFE channel to be low passed. So if we take a listen and a look now. And now we're hearing just the low end through Space Designer on the separate surround channel strip. If we bring back the left and right signals. Cool, and from here you can customize your surround channel strip any way you see fit, and that LFE signal is being passed along because we've set the send field to post-pan. Now the last thing here is if you're working with 3D objects. So if we convert our surround panner to a 3D object panner, and if we open the level meter on the master channel strip, check it out. Interesting, we don't see any signal for our synth bass on this level meter on the master channel strip, and that's because we changed the panner from surround to 3D object. And as we explored in our 3D object video, 3D objects go straight to the Atmos plugin. And that's why we see the left and right signals of our synth bass in the Dolby Atmos plugin preview, but we don't see any level signal prior to the Atmos plugin. And if we double click on the 3D object panner, we don't have a separate LFE slider to send our bass signal to the LFE of the surround bed. And that's because 3D objects are not part of the surround bed at all. So if you want to add a little heft and emphasis to your low-end instruments that are 3D objects, in that case, we're going to have to use a send and aux to get that LFE signal to the surround bed. Let's close our panner and the Atmos plugin. And let's create a new send assignment from send field 2 to bus 2. Let's double click on the panner and let's mute every single output as we're only interested in the LFE level. All right, cool. Let's option click bus 2 send level to set this to full blast. And let's take a look and a listen right now. All right, no LFE yet, but let's start to bump this up. And look at that. Now we have not only our synth bass as a 3D object going straight to the Atmos plugin, but now through bus 2 to aux 2, we can introduce a separate LFE emphasis for our synth bass to the surround bed. So again, remember the LFE channel is specifically for enhancement, for special effect, to add emphasis to, but don't send all the low end of your Atmos productions just to the LFE channel. All right, I'll see you for more in part 9 in our Atmos series here on Why Logic Pro Rules. Thanks so much, and I'll talk to you soon.